Hello and welcome back to the Final Lap podcast. This is Josh. I am not joined by Sam today. Usually am. He is off traveling in Europe, visiting London, so it'll just be me today, but we'll get right into it here with the NASCAR race at Michigan. Tyler Reddick picked up the win at Michigan as he survived two late race restarts to claim his second victory of the season and take the lead in the regular season point standings. Reddick led 15 laps, starting second, but he fell back early on and eventually made his way back through the field to take the checkered flag. But I think one of the big questions coming out of this race is, if Tyler Reddick is a championship contender, if he's flying under the radar as a championship contender, I think he is because, he's not on one of those big teams like Hendrick, Gibbs, or Penske, where we usually see the championship contenders come from. But he has all the tools to be a champion. He can win at all different types of tracks. He's won at super speedways. He's won at intermediates. He's won at road courses. He's won at them all. So he can win at all different types of tracks, which will definitely help him throughout the playoffs. And if he and that 45 team can stay hot in the playoffs, I see no reason that he can't win a championship. Like I said, he has all the tools to get everything done. Just one of the best drivers in the Cup Series right now. Really handled that transition from RCR to 2311 very well. Picked up right where he left off at RCR, just continuing to win races. One of the best drivers in the Cup Series. So I see no reason that he cannot win the championship this year, although he is on one of those underdog teams. We had a lot of trouble for contenders on the playoff line. Ross Chastain and Bubba Wallace were caught up in wrecks that saw them in 25th and 26th. However, some other guys that were around the cut line, managed to do pretty well. Ty Gibbs had a solid day, increased his advantage to the cut line with a third place finish, and Chris Buescher recovered from an accident, that same accident that Bubba Wallace was in, to finish sixth. So this cut line is narrowing down right now very tightly. I still think it's going to come down to Ross Chastain and Bubba Wallace getting in, with a winner who's already won this year winning this week. I think Martin Truex is pretty locked up at this point. I don't think anything is going to change his playoff outcomes. I think he's pretty much in at this point. He's so far above on points from everyone else around the cut line that it would take pretty much two DNFs from here and a lot of other bad things to happen for Martin Truex to not make it. So I think he's pretty safe. Right now, I think we're looking at Chastain, Wallace, Gibbs, and Buescher right now to make the cut. Bubba is the one on the outside looking in now. He's -1 to the cut line. Ross Chastain is just above in 16th. But I think those two guys are going to advance. We have some good tracks coming up for them. Buescher, he won at Daytona last year, so he could definitely win there again. But I just don't see that. I see, Chastain and Wallace moving on here. Wallace has been very good all year, and we know Chastain will do pretty much anything it takes to advance through to the cut line. And I think Ty Gibbs had a very good race this week. Just, picking up where he was earlier this year. He was definitely one of the top drivers. Started off the season really hot, but then kind of faded back throughout the summer, similar to what we've seen from William Byron, but not quite on the same level as that. I think Gibbs is going to advance Chastain and Wallace here. I think Buescher is going to be the one left out looking in. Obviously, that could change. We have Daytona where anyone can win at coming up, and then we also have Darlington, where any of these guys really can win there. So this cut line is going to be the talk of the last two races here. We'll just have to keep an eye out. But I think, as I've said in weeks past, that Chastain and Wallace and Gibbs are going to be the ones to advance, and Buescher is going to be the one on the outs. And this week, right after we had criticized NASCAR for being too late on the caution at Indy, they're back to their usual shenanigans, throwing cautions way too early. Threw a caution when MTJ got up in the wall in the closing laps. The car kept going, didn't leave any debris on the track. And, we're right back to where we were before Indy, where they're just throwing cautions way too early. I don't know why NASCAR can't have a more standardized officiating system for these types of things. I mean, if you just make it where, if the car keeps going, the driver is still continuing to drive the car. It's not just going under the car's power, but it's going under the driver's power. So he's, deemed safe. And there's no debris left on the track. I don't see why we're throwing these cautions at all. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I know, a lot of people have made it seem like it's NASCAR just trying to get restarts at the finish to make things interesting, which, I mean, it very well could be. So, yeah, it's just, they just need to get a more standardized officiating system for these things, just to make it known whenever something like this happens at the end that it's going to be a caution or it's not going to be a caution. And, Tyler Reddick was pretty upset on the radio when he heard that the caution came out for Martin Truex because, I mean, he saw what happened. He knows that he was just right up in the wall, right back off, no problems, no issues, kept going, didn't leave any debris behind. So, yeah, it's not really fair for these guys who, had gotten a 2 or 3 second advantage on the field in first to then be brought back to the field on a late race restart for really no reason. And moving on now to these Monday finishes for NASCAR, which it seems like they just can't avoid the rain or the weather at this point. I think, either moving up the start times or this is a much harder situation here, but making all the tracks have lights so we can finish under the lights if necessary. I think those are two options for fixing this problem that NASCAR has kind of created with these start times in the 2 or 3 o'clock range, where anywhere in the summer in the United States, it's going to be prime conditions for thunderstorms to be rolling through. You either need to have night races or, even earlier at like 12 or 1 to really take this out of the equation. And then if thunderstorms roll in at 2 or 3 and you start at 12 or 1, you can still have time on the back end to make things up and get things complete before sunset. So, yeah, we either need to be, making these tracks have lights or moving the start times up, which moving the start times up is a much easier thing to do, for all these tracks instead of making them all install lights, which can be pretty expensive. Well, let's move to our personal top 3 performers now for the NASCAR race at Michigan. First, I have Tyler Reddick. Fought back after a very rough start, managed 2 late race restarts very well, kept his cool, picked up the win. Very solid and very good performance there for Reddick. You like to see that if you're a Reddick fan or a Toyota fan heading into the playoffs. Second, I had Kyle Busch. He had a really solid day, finishing 4th, ran in the top 10 pretty much all day. Had a really good race for him, and it's nice to see him back competing near the top of the field, back competing for wins. I hope we see that more often in these last few races. He's going to need a win at this point to make it into the playoffs in these last 2 races. If not, I'd like to see him pick up a win at some point in the playoffs to keep that win streak alive. And then third, I had Zane Smith here. Moved up from 27th to 7th. Another really solid day for the rookie, and he's improved drastically throughout the season. And he is proving that he deserves a seat in the Cup Series. Just a really, really solid performance from Zane Smith here at Michigan. My stinker of the week this week is Kyle Larson. He spun himself, took out some drivers fighting for playoff spots there. You can't spin like that on your own when you're in one of the fastest cars on the field. That's just, not really acceptable, and we know Larson is better than that. He even said so after the race. So, yeah, that's my stinker of the week, is Kyle Larson. Well, let's move now to IndyCar at Worldwide Technology Raceway, just outside St. Louis here, in the 5th to last race of the season, so we're getting down to it in terms of the championship here. But Josef Newgarden won a contentious race at Worldwide Technology Raceway after a spin in the closing laps by him, and then a wild and somewhat controversial late race restart. In my opinion, that restart, he was definitely going slow, but according to the data, he didn't let off the throttle at all, didn't use any of the brake. In my opinion, he didn't do anything outside of the rules to warrant, any type of penalty for that late race restart. I know, many other drivers on the field were upset, but if he's not getting off the throttle or using the brake there, you can't say that he's, really stacking up the field in a way that you're not expecting, as long as he's keeping that consistent pace, which, according to the data, he was. There's some solutions here that I think IndyCar could look at. Maybe adding a minimum speed for the lead driver that they have to maintain so that these guys aren't caught off guard when they're going slower than what they would expect. Or just making the lead driver go once the green flag drops so that there's no confusion throughout the field on, when exactly the race is restarting here. Even combining these two might be a good idea. Make the lead driver maintain that minimum speed and then have them go once the green flag drops so that everyone knows right when the race is starting. And so that, second and third right behind the leader don't have a unfair disadvantage of the leader just taking off without them really being ready for it, just like, the first place guy is, obviously, because he's the one setting the pace and, deciding when to leave. Those are just some solutions and ideas here that I think IndyCar should look at because this was a really good race from IndyCar, and, it's going to be kind of mired in some controversy here late in the race. So I think, if they want to get rid of that, this is something that they should definitely look at. Will Power was very active on Saturday. He didn't make any friends throughout the field and gave a classic Will Power bird to his teammate, Josef Newgarden. The first time he's done that to a teammate, to my knowledge, at least, in IndyCar. It was right after that, wreck at the end. And then he also apparently yelled at David Malukas after the race for the incident that those two got into in the closing laps as well. Just Will Power was just all over the place. Don't know if he's just, getting a little bit just upset, really, because, we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, and any little, moment could change, whether or not he wins the championship. So I think he's just getting very frustrated by all that, and obviously took it out on a few people over the weekend. Now, speaking of David Malukas and his moment with Will, I think that was definitely on Power there going into turn 1 and then throughout turn 2. That was not on Malukas at all, in my opinion. David never came up off the bottom of the track, gave Will plenty of room, especially on a track where you can use that top and higher grooves and make those work and actually make passes there. So he could have definitely used that for defense of that position. I think, Will Power was just not really giving him room, didn't want to give him that position, which I completely understand, but you also have to give people the room to make moves of their own, and Malukas didn't do anything there that was outside of the rules. He kept the car on the track, gave Will plenty of room up top, never moved up and drifted into Will. So yeah, I think that move is completely on Will there. I don't know why he was upset with Malukas after the race, because like I just said, that move was kind of all on Will. So yeah, just more frustration from Will there. I think he's just getting frustrated that this championship isn't going the way that he would like, which I completely understand that. Brian Herta had some interesting comments after the race, as he said, quote, "There's a growing feeling in the paddock that there is not a level playing field." This was in reference to penalties being applied to Team Penske drivers compared to the rest of the grid. I think that this was always going to be a problem when the owner of the series also owns one of the teams in that series. And I'm really honestly surprised it took this long for someone to say something or for something like this to come about. I think that this was always going to be a problem here. And IndyCar, I know a lot of people don't want Roger Penske to own IndyCar for many other reasons. I think that this is another reason as well. I don't know if, they are actually making certain rules different for their drivers compared to the rest of the field. But I do know that, whenever there is going to be a controversial penalty come up, this is always going to be something that happens, and people are going to think in their back of their minds, oh, the owner of this series also owns that team. Could they be playing some sort of game here that's not fair to the rest of the field? So yeah, I think, this is another reason why Roger Penske probably shouldn't own IndyCar and someone else should take over that operation. The rest of the race, we had problems for championship contenders all over. Pato O'Ward had an engine failure early on in the race, finished back in 26th, and that might just take him out of the championship contention here. Will Power, obviously, we touched on him, involved in that late race restart pile-up, and finished 18th. And then Kyle Kirkwood, who had an outside chance of the championship coming into the race, caught up in one of the early wrecks and finished 22nd. So some very big issues for these championship contenders here. Obviously, like we mentioned, Kirkwood on the outside, but Pato and Will Power were very much in the conversation to win the championship, especially with all these ovals remaining. Both of them did not have the days that they wanted to have. And this is really even worse for Will Power because he led the most laps that all day on Saturday. It really looked like a car that could win, and now he finished in 18th. Alex Palou ended up finishing 4th, lost all of those points in the championship. So yeah, I think it was a really bad day for Power. O'Ward, he seemed like he had a pretty fast car, was on pace for a top 5, if not the win. But an engine failure, there's nothing you can do about that. So yeah, many problems for these championship contenders, but I think the worst of it was for Will Power. And Palou now has a 59-point lead over Colton Herta in the championship, 65-point advantage over Scott Dixon, 66 points over Will Power, 73 points over Scott McLaughlin, and then 98-point advantage over Pato O'Ward. I don't know if any of these guys honestly have a chance to catch up to Palou at this point. 59 points is quite the margin, even just to second place. I still think of any of these guys, Scott Dixon is in the best place to take those points away and catch up in the championship. Just 66 points behind his teammate there. And, he's a guy who is better on ovals than Palou is. Obviously, didn't really show that this week, finishing behind his teammate there at Worldwide Technology. But yeah, I still think he is the one who has the best chance to catch up to Palou here in the championship. Now let's move to the personal top 3 performers for IndyCar at Worldwide Technology Raceway. At first, we had Alex Palou. Didn't hear anything about him all day, but he still managed to gain points in his championship hunt here. Finished 4th, and yeah, just continuing to grow that championship gap. Just amazes me what Palou is able to do because, like I said, we don't hear from him all day, don't even really notice him in the race, and then he finishes 4th and extends that championship lead. Just very Alex Palou of him to do. Even when, he didn't have his best race, ovals aren't really his thing, but yeah, still continuing to open up that gap in the championship. Second, I had David Malukas. Was on track for another great race here before being taken out. Not anything that he could do about what happened there. So yeah, I still have him second just because he was putting on one heck of a drive and just continuing to really own this speedway in his 3 races here. Had 2 very solid performances before this, and now he was on track for another solid one before being taken out, not of his own doing. Third, I had Linus Lundqvist, second podium of the season for the rookie. On track to win Rookie of the Year. I think he has been the best rookie so far, so that would make sense. First podium on an oval as well for Lundqvist. So very good start to the season for the driver at Chip Ganassi. I think he'll keep that seat there going forward. Just really solid from Lundqvist. My stinker of the week this week is going to have to be Will Power. Led the most laps actually, but with the Malukas incident, finishing back in 18th and losing all those points in the championship, that it looked like he was actually going to gain for much of the race. Can't say any really good things about what Power, at least in the second half of that race, what he did there. So Will Power is going to have to be my stinker of the week for IndyCar at Worldwide Technology Raceway. Now let's touch on some quick things, some news of the week here. Austin Dillon's playoff eligibility was revoked by NASCAR, but he was allowed to keep the win after the incident at Richmond last week. What I think about this, it's very interesting because we've never had anything like this happen before where someone has won, but they've taken away that playoff eligibility. But we also haven't really seen anything like this, at least since the playoffs started, for a driver, picking up a win this way. So I think it was very unprecedented by NASCAR to make this decision, but it was also kind of uncharted waters for them as well. They had to make a stand here in some way, and I think that this was ultimately the best way to do it. Just very interesting that it happened this way because we've never seen anything like this before. Some other news, David Malukas headed to AJ Foyt Racing for 2025. No news about their current driver lineup of Santino Ferrucci and Stingray Robb. We'll see what happens. Which one of those two they keep. I don't see them going to a 3-car operation, so one of those two is going to have to go. But yeah, it seems like Roger Penske really wanted Malukas to head to AJ Foyt. It might have even put up some money for him to go there. So I think Penske sees something in Malukas that he might take over a seat whenever it opens at Penske. It'd have to probably be Will Power, considering the age of the other two drivers and how they've been performing in recent years. So yeah, Malukas might be on track to take Will Power's seat whenever Power decides to retire from IndyCar. He's the oldest one at that team, so it would have to be his seat. Very funny though that we're talking about Malukas taking Power's seat with everything that happened this week. Also, Connor Daly will race for Juncos Hollinger for the remainder of 2024, as that team parted ways with Augustine Canapino. I think, the Canapino thing, that it was probably Canapino's decision to leave. It didn't seem like things were going the way that he had hoped them to go in IndyCar. Obviously, what happened earlier this year with him and Teo Pourchaire, he decided to skip a race because he was dealing with some of the things that his fans were actually putting up, going off on Teo Pourchaire about their incident. So yeah, I think that things just weren't going the way that Canapino was expecting them to go in IndyCar, and that's why we see him parting ways with Juncos Hollinger. Connor Daly taking that seat, though. He had a pretty solid race, was caught up in an early accident last week at Worldwide Technology, but still managed to finish in the top 15, I believe. So very solid performance from Connor Daly, and hopefully we see more performances like that moving forward. Now, one thing that was fun to talk about this week and was really setting the internet ablaze was the Kyle Larson comments that saying that he thinks he is the better driver between him and Max Verstappen, and that he thinks that he's the best driver really in the world. And this set, all kinds of debates between F1 fans, NASCAR fans, IndyCar fans, really fans of all forms of motorsport on who they think the best driver in the world is right now. What I'll say here is that I think, they're both good at what they do. They're both extremely talented at what they do. And I think if either one of them tried to do what the other one did, they would do it pretty well, but not as good as the other one does it. So I think, we have to look at them in the disciplines that they each race the most in. And, Max Verstappen said earlier this year, talking about Kyle Larson, actually, if Max tried to go race on dirt, probably wouldn't go very well for him. It would take a little bit of time. He might be able to eventually catch on and, put in very solid performances, but it wouldn't go very well at the beginning. And I think that that's what we have to look at here is that, these two drivers are driving completely different disciplines in motorsport. I mean, really on four wheels, this is about as different as you can get between F1 and NASCAR. So, yeah, we just have to look at it, between each discipline of what these drivers are doing and, take it from there. I think that they're pretty equal in my honest opinion. In each of their respective disciplines, they're by far the best driver and have the most talent, at Kyle Larson in NASCAR and Max Verstappen in F1. So I think they're pretty equal drivers, to be honest, and, that's kind of my conclusion from this debate. Well, let's do some quick predictions for next week. F1 is back after their summer break. They're returning for the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. I'm going to have Max Verstappen pick up the win here at his home race in front of the Orange Army and extend that championship lead. I just think after summer break, he's going to come back refreshed, hasn't won in a few races, and I think, driving in front of his home fans and at his home track is going to be enough to propel him to the win. In second, I have George Russell. I think he's going to rebound with a strong performance after that last win was taken away due to his car being underweight. So, yeah, I see George, having a strong rebound performance here, picking up a second-place finish. And then third, I have Lewis Hamilton. I think Mercedes is going to have a faster car compared to the McLarens and the Ferraris, and maybe even faster than the Red Bulls, but I think Max is still ultimately going to get the win. So yeah, I have Lewis finishing third in that Mercedes. I don't think he's going to be the better of the two Mercedes between him and George this weekend, but I still have him on the podium. Now moving over to NASCAR at Daytona. I mean, honestly, who could say here it's Daytona, it's a super speedway. We have no idea who could win. It could be Justin Haley. It could be, it could be SVG is driving this week. It could be literally anybody picking up the win here. But some guys like Bubba Wallace and Ross Chastain, like I mentioned earlier, really need wins. They're both pretty good on super speedways, so I wouldn't be surprised to see either of them get a win. Chris Buescher as well won this exact race last year, so, watch out for him as well. Also needs a win on the cut line. But my pick is going to be Chase Elliott. Got one of the best finishing positions in the last 7 races here at Daytona. 2 top 5s, 4 top 10s. And, I know we can't go off of form completely at Daytona because it's Daytona. It's such a wild track and literally anybody can win. But to make the best pick I can, I'm going to have to go with Chase Elliott here to get the win at Daytona. And then lastly here, next weekend, we have IndyCar at Portland. I think Alex Palou is going to pick up the win here. Won 2 of the last 3 races here. Very dominant, seems very comfortable here. But also watch out for Scott Dixon. He's podiumed here in the last 3 races. I believe all third-place finishes. But, he's Alex Palou's teammate at Chip Ganassi. He needs a win desperately to keep his playoff hopes, or his championship hopes alive, rather. So, yeah, I think, Palou's going to get the win, but also watch out for Scott Dixon. I think he could have a very solid chance at picking up the win here. Now, that's all we have for this week on the Final Lap podcast. Stay tuned next week. We should be back with both of us on the podcast. Stay tuned for next week. We'll be recapping F1 at the Dutch Grand Prix, NASCAR at Daytona, and IndyCar at Portland. So it'll be a busy week next week, recapping and going over all of those races. Thank you guys for listening. If you'd like, please subscribe or, like and download these podcasts. That would be very much appreciated.